from the eulogies that were given yesterday was from Senator Graham's niece, and she talked about what he meant to her and the family.
How lucky were all of us to have known Lindsey. He was a humble man from humble beginnings, and he never forgot that. He took care of people in need. He defended the defenseless. He put everyone above himself. He was the most selfless person I have ever known. As they say, he would have given someone the shirt off of his back. He was strong-willed, hardworking, and his loyalty was unwavering. You could always count on Lindsey. But most of all, Lindsey was a godly man. So while we grieve our loss here on earth, I find grace and comfort knowing that he has gone home to reunite with his mother and father that he lost far too young.
Family and friends yesterday at Washington National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. And again, Senator Graham's funeral is going to take place just about a half mile from here in Columbia at First Baptist Church, where family, friends, and the public will hopefully be able to get a seat so they can pay their respects, and more eulogies will be spoken about the late senator. And that's where we join my colleague, Emily Dean. She is outside the church talking to people as they attend this funeral. Emily?
Good morning, Bill. Well, it's certainly a somber tone here at the First Baptist Church, and in just a few minutes, I'm told that his sister, Darlene, will be arriving, and already this morning, we've seen members of nearly every branch of the military arriving to pay their respects, and with me right now is a World War II veteran here to pay his respects. Sir, what's your name?
My name is Ted Hassel, and I'm a 10th my grandfather, 10 generations ago, founded the First Baptist Church in America in Providence, Rhode Island, and he reestablished the founding of the state of Rhode Island.
Isn't that remarkable? And you're here with your son, also a military veteran.
Yes, ma'am. I served 30 years in the Air Force, retired as a lieutenant colonel, and of course I have great respect for Lindsey Graham and his service to our country.
And I understand you had the pleasure of meeting Senator Graham. Can you tell us about that experience?
We were in line together for an airplane flight, and I put my arm around him. He's younger than me, since I'm 100. I'm 100 years old right now. At any rate, I said, Lindsey, I said, the only thing I'm interested in you is, are you a Christian? And he said, I was baptized at the age of 5. And that was my encounter with Lindsey Graham. But I like him.
And what brought you here to pay your respects today?
My son, and he lives here. And I recently married 4 years ago to a woman that was going to his church. So that's why I'm here.
And being a fellow serviceman, both of you, what does it mean to be here today?
It means that we have the freedom to be able to worship, and that's a very, very important thing, yeah.
Being an Air Force chaplain, retired, the freedom of faith that we celebrate in the United States of America because of people like Lindsey Graham serving our country and serving our freedom of worship, very important. I want to add, too, my dad served on the USS Roosevelt during World War II.
After World War II, yeah.
After World War II. Yeah. Well, I'm sure there will be many more servicemen and women coming here to First Baptist Church to pay their respects. We're going to continue to have live coverage throughout the morning, so stay with us here on ABC News 4. Back to you.
All right, Emily, thank you. Well, Charleston County Councilwoman Jenny Costa Honeycutt and Charleston Mayor William Cogswell are expected to attend today's funeral. When we come back, the procession for Senator Lindsey Graham is expected to begin at the State House, as you just heard from Bill and Emily, as he makes his final journey home. Stay with us.
check there. He can't go up the
Right,
stairs.
no.
You know?
Let
Is there
me.
any chance, I'm with the Associated Press, is there any chance I can quickly ask you a couple of questions about why you're doing
Should you
it?
roll on that by
Sure,
chance?
absolutely.
Okay. Let me mic you up, sir. Okay. Oops. Go ahead. Pulled that right out of my ear.
Bump the mic up a bit, please,
I'll just
sir.
put this down
Yes,
here.
I can.
Okay.
Check, check, check. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Does that sound better?
Yeah, I think you're good to go.
Your somber voice is a lot quieter than regular.
Senator Graham was extremely popular in the Lowcountry on either side of the aisle.
He had an impact, and that took a lot of hard work across the aisle.
That was part of Senator Lindsey Graham's legacy and one of the many reasons Lowcountry leaders made the trip to D.C. to pay their respects.
It was a beautiful thing how many people were there, whether you're Republican or Democrat. At this point, it was a life that mattered.
It was his unique brand of retail politics. He had this humor about him that was just so personable and relatable, and people loved that.
Graham was often able to shepherd a number of local projects like the Charleston Harbor deepening through federal red tape.
They require help from the federal government, be it getting through bureaucracy or, in many cases, funding, and there was no greater champion than Senator Graham. So we owe him a huge debt of gratitude.
He was a friend of the Lowcountry. Whenever we needed something, he was there. He always came through, whether it be through appropriations or whatever asks we had.
On a personal level, he shared a passion for people.
10 days before he died, he had arranged for a very intimate private meeting with some of the leaders in Berkeley County. He was a friend to all the different levels. There were people at the city level, the county level.
As local leaders continue their work, they feel inspired by Graham's attitude toward public service.
We always face some criticism. To be able to do that with respect and a little bit of humor is something I'll definitely take away.
There are moments, I think, when you do serve the public when things get rough. And when he was faced with that, he kept going. So I think that's inspiring for all of us that serve the public in the ups and downs to say, I'm going to keep going.
And that was Webright reporting. Let's go now back to the state capitol in Columbia. Bill Burr is live there this morning as things are getting underway. Bill, I can see a lot of people gathering right behind you right now.
Yeah, actually, here on the north steps of the State House grounds, we see just behind me some former and current lawmakers that are gathering, and just behind the camera, we see about a couple hundred people or so that are looking on. Perhaps they were voters, perhaps just fans of the senator and onlookers who would like to be here to pay their respects. At this point in the program, we're waiting for the late senator's remains to be carried by the South Carolina State Guard caisson detachment. There's going to be a presentation here on the State House grounds of law enforcement from agencies across South Carolina, and then there will be a brief pause. At 11 o'clock this morning, there's going to be an F-16 flyover via the 169th Fighter Wing from McEntire Joint National Guard Base. And then following that flyover, the caisson will proceed down Main Street and arrive at First Baptist Church in Columbia. There are some people, as we saw from Emily Deanne a little while ago, some people standing outside of the church, and it's open to the public, although seating is limited. So from what we understand, the church officials are expecting a lot of people to be there, and it's going to be a packed house at First Baptist. If you want me to, I can step out of the way. Jason, can we see some people behind me? I know you were signaling. I'm not sure if we can see some of the Senator Tim Scott, I'm told, is just up onto the State House grounds, and some other state representatives and state senators are gathering here too. I see Attorney General Alan Wilson. Of course, he's the Republican nominee for governor, and some other dignitaries here too. I see Reverend Wes Church. He is the senior pastor at First Baptist, about a half-mile away. He will be taking part in the funeral here at 11 o'clock, or actually at noon, about a half-mile away. There's a large media contingency here, too. I'm on the side of the State House, and then we have other people from local and national media outlets on the other side. So it's not too many events like this happened in South Carolina. I had reached out to the Department of Archives and History, and they gave me just a brief background, and they said that this is not uncommon for a current or former lawmaker to have a funeral procession here and to have a special designation, recognition for them. Going back to 1986, former Speaker of the House Sullivan Blatt was here, and then after that, Floyd Spence in his passing in 2001. Of course, Senator Strom Thurmond, when he passed away in 2003, something similar happened here, and then former Governor Carol Campbell in 2005. In 2015, after the horrific shooting at Mother Emanuel, the pastor of Mother Emanuel, Reverend Clement Pinckney, of course, he was a state senator here, and his remains were brought here, and there was a special service here back in 2015. And then after that, the legendary Senator Fritz Hollings, who served in state government before he went on to the U.S. Senate. And then most recently, earlier this year, when civil rights icon Reverend Jesse Jackson passed away, there was a ceremony outside here on the State House grounds. So a lot of history is being made, has been made here, and it's going to continue today as we and the public pay their respects to the late Senator Lindsey Graham. As we gather and wait for the remains of Senator Graham and his casket to come here to the State House grounds, we're going to touch base with my colleague, Emily Deanne. She is standing outside First Baptist Church on Hampton Street here in downtown Columbia. Emily?
Bill, people have been arriving for the last 30 minutes, including members of all branches of the military. And this gentleman, we were just talking about how this is really a time to bring people together. What's your name, sir?
I'm Reverend Dr. George Gatgunas, attorney at law. I practice in Charleston on Broad Street.
And why are you here to pay your respects this morning?
I would hope that despite our sharp differences in this current milieu, that when one of us passes, we can recognize that from one's heart, one can love our people, love our nation, love our principles, and of course love the rule of law. This man certainly did. There is a time for war and a time for peace. In this time of need for condolences, I would hope and plead we sheathe our swords and come together, mourn, and realize one can love our country despite our differences.
And what would you hope that South Carolinians take away from the passing and the legacy of Senator Graham?
He loved life. If we're going to err in judgment, let us err on the side of life. I realize that emotions run deep, and some issues relevant to life strike straight to the heart and are deeply personal. However, we should respect anyone who respects life, because that's what brings us all here, and that's why we're here.
Absolutely. And in just a few moments, we know that Senator Graham's sister, Darlene, will be arriving here, as well with other dignitaries from across the state. Back to you, Ashley.
All right, Emily, thank you. Well, after his death, we did catch up with people who live in Pickens County. That is where there will be a private burial with family there later. We want to hear now from the community following his sudden death.
Shock has been the primary thing because, I mean, again, he's been a staple. He's been a staple of the area. Everyone knows who he is, regardless of whether you agree with him politically or not.
Super nice guy. Love being from this area. A good family person. Just a real nice guy.
Like she said, it is a sad day, and he'll be very missed, very badly.
It's hard to believe that someone that's been in Congress for that long is gone that quickly.
Well, in a letter from the Secretary of the Air Force, Troy Meek, yesterday, the department directed Air Mobility Command to take steps to rename the installation Joint Base Lindsey Graham. So we brought you this yesterday. The letter says renaming the installation and its shared airfield will honor Graham's years of military service and memorialize his legacy. He served the military for 3 decades and left a lasting legacy through his service, not only with the military, but also leading our state and taking charge at the nation's capital. I believe now we're going back to Bill Burr, who is live at the state capitol, and no doubt somber out there, but still, you know, Bill, a celebration of his lasting legacy.
There really is, Ashley. There are a lot of people here that, of course, are sad. It's a sad occasion, but there are some smiles because people are here just behind me, some lawmakers. They're happy to see each other and relive some of the good times that they had with former Congressman and, of course, Senator Lindsey Graham with their interactions. They remember him as being a true public servant for the state of South Carolina. And I'm going to step out of the way here as I understand the late senator's casket is being escorted here to the north steps of the State House grounds. Touching moment here at the State House grounds as the remains of the late Senator Lindsey Graham being carried by the South Carolina State Guard Caisson Detachment. We're awaiting now a presentation of law enforcement from agencies across the Palmetto State here on the State House grounds. touching moments here in Columbia, South Carolina, as an F-16 flyover from the 169th Fighter Wing from McEntire Joint National Guard Base flew over the State House grounds in honor of the late Senator Lindsey Graham. Now, the South Carolina State Guard Caisson Detachment is proceeding down Main Street and is heading towards Hampton Street, where it'll arrive at First Baptist Church of Columbia for the late Senator's funeral, which will take place at about noon. Current and former lawmakers and voters and South Carolinians and people from out of state. I've talked to a gentleman here from Frederick, Maryland, who wanted to come down and pay his respects because he was a fan of the late senator. They're all gathered here on the State House grounds for this important day in South Carolina history. As I said earlier, there are plenty of hugs and handshakes, happy moments, which is what the senator would want to have, and people talking about their experiences with the late senator. Governor McMaster, his family walking towards the hearse, walking down Main Street, and other elected leaders here. They're heading to their cars, heading to their various forms of transportation. Many of them are going to be heading to First Baptist Church of Columbia, which is about a half mile from here, as they say their final goodbyes to the late Senator Lindsey Graham. We heard yesterday during one of the eulogies for Senator Graham at Washington National Cathedral from the pastor of Corinth Baptist Church in Seneca, South Carolina, in the upstate. That's where Senator Lindsey Graham was a member, from what we understand, and where he attended church services there through the years. But I'm also told he was a close friend of First Baptist Church here in Columbia, and he had attended services here through the years, according to various church members. His last visit at First Baptist was actually on Sunday, June 28th. He was attending the Carolina Celebration of Liberty concert. It's something that the church performs every year, and it's just a big patriotic celebration leading up to July 4th. And it airs on TV stations across the state, including Fox 24 in Charleston. But from what we understand, I spoke to a church member just the other day, and she said that the senator was at the church on June 28th, and he was in great spirits, and he was happy to see everybody, and so many churchgoers were happy to see him. And of course, they were stunned to find out that he died just several days later on July 11th. So the State House grounds here on the north steps are starting to clear out as people are going either back to work or back home, or perhaps some are going to walk or drive to First Baptist Church down the street here for the funeral services. A very touching moment here, and another piece of history in South Carolina political history as people are witnessing a special event in the Palmetto State. As you might expect, security is very tight here on the State House grounds. It always is, but it's especially secure today because of so many people that are going to be here. I only see one protester, someone that's holding a banner, who was not a fan of Senator Graham, but other than that, though, that's about it. Just a lot of people here who are coming here, people of all ages that have wanted to come and pay their respects and see, as I said, another part of South Carolina history, because this happens from time to time in our state. We don't like it when it happens, but nevertheless, it's one of the great traditions here in South Carolina, whether it's an elected leader or a special civil rights leader, they will have their time in the limelight here, so people can come and pay their respects, say a prayer, and honor the deceased. And that's what happened today here on Gervais Street in Maine in downtown Columbia. Ashley?
Bill, no doubt some moving words there and a moving celebration for him as we saw the horse-drawn carriage, and we're watching that procession. We'll be checking in with Bill throughout the morning. Emily Deanne is also live with more coverage as well. I believe we're going to continue to take a live look right now at downtown Columbia, and you can see a lot of people walking. As Bill mentioned, some of them might be going to that public service for him at First Baptist Church, not far from the State House. The State House taking a live look right now at this procession, definitely in the national spotlight following yesterday's funeral services in our nation's capital. The focus now back here at home. And we know there's going to be a private burial as well. That is for family only in Pickens County. But this service coming up today at noon at First Baptist Church is open to the public. Bill was talking about security. I know there's a clear bag policy, and we could see throughout some of our cameras and live looks this morning, and definitely an increase in security presence. Taking a live look now at an officer there. So it's good to hear only one protester there, but for the most part, everything peaceful and a mix of, you know, somber, but it's really celebratory because he had such a major impact, a lasting impact here in our state and at the U.S. Capitol. Lindsey Graham had just returned back to the U.S. after talking with folks in Ukraine over sanctions for Russia as that war continues. He also has been very outspoken about the ongoing war in Iran. And then we heard from people here in our area, in the Tri-County area, that he was set to talk with some folks in Berkeley County. So he was heavily involved still in our state and at the Capitol, always working. That is one thing we heard from his sister, Interim Senator Darlene Graham. And let's go ahead and listen to what the president and vice president had to say at yesterday's service in D.C.
He was the kind of guy who would walk into the Senate. And when he walked into the Senate, this was a guy who couldn't have stood more than 5'6" or 5'7". He's washed like he was 6'5". He had an attitude to him, and it's one of the reasons why Lindsey Graham was Lindsey Graham. But he would walk into the United States Senate, and he would slap you on the back. He would greet the person who served his food. He treated everybody the same because he was fascinated and he loved every single person in this chamber. And that's a great testament to the man.
He died doing the work he was born to do. He was truly a great politician, serving the country he loved to serve so deeply. He went out at the peak of his career, the top of his game, as a legend that every one of us, many of us here today, blessed to know him, and a friend that none of us will ever forget. There was truly nobody like Lindsey Graham.
And again, that was yesterday in D.C., taking a live look at Columbia right now as the procession continues downtown after leaving the State House. If you're just now joining us, we are, of course, following the celebration of life honoring former Senator, late Senator Lindsey Graham.
Live pictures right now from downtown Columbia ahead of the funeral service for former Senator Lindsey Graham. You're watching live pictures from our various TV cameras that we have, including SCE TV. A poignant moment here as people say their goodbyes to the late senator. A touching moment and a bipartisan moment, too. I have to say, I have seen people from both parties that are here, obviously Republicans because we're a Republican-led state, but I have seen Democrat lawmakers here. I believe I saw State Senator Ed Sutton from Charleston County here on the State House grounds paying his respects. I saw some other lawmakers here too from the Democrat Party. Also, an important thing to note is that Congressman Jim Clyburn, the longtime Democrat from the 6th District, representing the 6th District, he will be one of the people speaking during the funeral service at First Baptist Church. Obviously, Congressman Clyburn and Senator Graham, they had their differences on many issues, but I did see them together through the years when they came together for various issues, including finding funding for the harbor dredging project at the Charleston Harbor, and they worked together on that to secure federal funding to make sure that harbor was dredged. So obviously, everyone knows that we live in polarizing times when it comes to politics, but it's also nice to note that our politicians on both sides of the aisle can come together for the common good to help advance the interests of the voters of South Carolina.
Live here at Hampton Street, we're beginning to see the casket be removed.
State Guard.
The casket of late
understand is
Senator
now
Graham now being
moving the
lifted
casket.
off of the horse-drawn carriage. Members of every branch of the military assisting in carrying that casket across Hampton Street now into First Baptist Church. Servicemen and women saluting late Senator Graham as his body is escorted into First Baptist Church here on Hampton Street. Turning the corner now. Continuing up the stairs with the family of late Senator Graham following behind, including Darlene, his sister. You're hearing multiple helicopters and planes overhead as the casket draped in the red, white, and blue is carried up the stairs into First Baptist Church. Members of Graham's family looking onwards. Many of them dabbing tears from their eyes, watching the casket be escorted into the church right now. The family now following behind, entering the church here on Hampton Street. The family of late Senator Graham now inside First Baptist Church, along with his casket. Friends, family, loved ones, and many constituents now entering the church to pay their respects. the horse-drawn carriage, as well as servicemen and women now exiting Hampton Street. The hearse now arriving in front of First Baptist Church, which will eventually take late Senator Graham to his final resting spot. The celebration of life honoring the life and service of Senator Lindsey Graham, scheduled to begin at noon here at First Baptist Church on Hampton Street.
And that is Emily Deanne, who is live there at First Baptist Church, giving us the sights and sounds as we are waiting for the service to start at noon there in Columbia. You can certainly see an increased police presence on all levels, local, state, and federal, as people from across the country possibly come to our state's capital to honor late Senator Lindsey Graham. A little bit of background. We've talked so much about how long he served, more than 30 years. He was first elected to the U.S. House of Representatives back in 1994. Then he became a senator in 2002. That was after former Senator Strom Thurmond retired after he served for 47 years in the Senate. We know, no doubt, it's very somber, as Emily and Bill have been talking about, but we saw Senator Tim Scott, one of his closest friends, smiling as he entered the Capitol a little bit earlier, and taking a live look right now inside the church there at First Baptist. You can see people lining in, filing in ahead of that noon start time for this service as they reflect on his life and legacy on the local level, and no doubt really a global level. He had so many friends. Everyone has shared so many stories about him having an impact on people here in the Low Country, in our state, in our country, and across the world. As we wait for the service to start, we also have been following where it all began at the state capitol earlier this morning. Bill Burr has been there all morning long, and it was very busy earlier, but now you can see most of people have headed now or are making their way to the church there just down the street from the state.
Yeah, Ashley, you were talking moments ago about Senator Graham's lengthy career in public service. He started here at the State House back in, I believe it was 1992, when he ran for a House seat and he won. He did a one term for 2 years, and then ran for the third district congressional seat, where he served for 4 terms. I remember interviewing Senator Graham when he was running for president. I believe it was 2015 or 2016. It was about that time that then Charleston Mayor Joe Riley decided that he was not going to run for re-election. Joe Riley was one of the longest running mayors in the country at that time. He served, it was close to 40 years or so. And I was asking Senator Graham his thoughts about that. And he had a lot of respect for former Mayor Joe Riley. And he jokingly told me, he says, well, Bill, with his Southern accent, he said, Bill, South Carolinians, they like to change their politicians once every 40 years or so. And then we were laughing. And of course, course, he is referring to Fritz Hollings and Strom Thurmond and Joe Riley and some others that are out there too. So, politics aside, Senator Graham had a great sense of humor, but he also realized the importance of the job, and I really truly believe that he relished what he did in trying to help South Carolinians and help the country for that matter. As I mentioned earlier, he had a working friendship relationship with 6th District Congressman Jim Clyburn, a longtime Democrat. They came together on some key issues through the years, including the key federal funding to dredge the Charleston Harbor. That was several years ago. They both made the case to their respective parties and to the bureaucrats in Washington that we had to have that money in Charleston to get that project done. And there were others throughout the years too, but those are just some of the ones that I covered through the years here in Charleston, and covering politics through the years. And it's been such a joy to interview so many important people, including Senator Lindsey Graham. Ironically, I was checking my Facebook page on Monday, and one of the Facebook memories that I had that popped up from this past Monday, it was 10 years ago where Senator Graham, then Governor Nikki Haley, and several other elected leaders celebrated the grand opening of Mercedes-Benz in Lansing, and that was a big deal. I was there with our photojournalist Jason Ty, and Congressman Graham was there, and he wanted to take part in the celebration. And there's no doubt in my mind that there was some work done behind the scenes, perhaps on his level, to perhaps find some funding and to make the government machine work to make sure that they could secure that major employer in the Lowcountry.
All right, Bill, and we'll be checking in back with Bill as well as Emily Deanne coming up. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back after this.
And he has that opportunity to sort of walk in the same footsteps as his friend, and it'll be very curious to see if he brings that into any of his remarks at First Baptist later on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also just thinking back to the power of our delegation too. Of course, Senator Graham was over the Senate Budget Committee, so he worked on getting reconciliation done for that one big beautiful bill last year. And we haven't actually talked too much about earmarks and his ability to do that to his detriment to an extent, right? Because Republicans were always against bringing the money back and fighting against earmarks and big spending. We got to cut spending. We got to stop with these pet projects. But some of those pet projects were making sure that the Savannah River site, the national lab down there, was continuing on after what we saw with the failure of the mixed oxide fuel fabrication facility too. That's where they were taking weapons grade, I believe it was plutonium, to repurpose it into reactor fuel. It might have been uranium. Can't get it quite straight there, but that was a deal that we had with Russia, and then that failed, and then it was like, what do we do with SRS? And now they're doing plutonium pit production. That's a Senator Lindsey Graham directive right there. You see his hands all over those defense spending bills and bringing back money for Joint Base Charleston, which we were just talking about how it could be renamed after Senator Graham. There's so many military institutions in the state. We're such a military-friendly state. You have Parris Island, you have Fort Jackson here in Columbia. So many different things. You have Marine Corps Air Station Beaufort with the F-35s down there. And like we just saw with McIntyre Joint Air National Guard Base with the 169th wing right there. And of course, at Shaw Air Force Base too, you have Air Force CENTCOM right there, which is playing a huge role right now with what's going on. And I didn't have a chance to mention about the F-16s, but another story with Senator Graham. We know that the F-16s from Lockheed Martin are now being produced in Greenville. That move happened in 2019 after a move from Texas, Fort Worth, Texas, because Lockheed was going to produce the F-35 down in Texas. They needed a home for the F-16. Well, guess what? How do you think that got there, Kirk?
Well, and I think that also goes to show how Lindsey Graham did a lot of this stuff behind the
Yes.
scenes in ways that people just don't recognize. So everything that you mentioned, it's also important to remember that when he was a member of the House, that's when the military had a huge downsizing in the mid-90s. And there was very real concerns that several bases across South Carolina might close, including Fort Jackson. And Lindsey Graham worked very, very hard behind the scenes to minimize the impact of those cuts to bases in South Carolina. And I think that's one of the reasons that he became sort of the leading candidate to replace Strom Thurmond in the Senate, was the fact that he was very willing to do what was necessary, even if it was out of the spotlight, behind the scenes, not, in a glamorous kind of way, but he was very willing to do what was necessary to protect the state of South Carolina and the people that live here.
Yeah, and with that, of course, the economic impact.
Big names there today to say their final goodbyes.
Well, Ashley, as you know, Columbia is the center of South Carolina politics, and it was a fitting location for Senator Graham's casket to come here so the entire public could come and pay their respects, perhaps say a prayer and say goodbye to the man that served them for so many years. As we mentioned before, he started here back in the early 90s as an unknown man from Pickens, South Carolina, and moved here, got elected here in the State House of Representatives, served one term, moved on to Congress, and then moved on to the Senate. The mood here earlier was very respectful. Of course, it was sad. It always is when you're saying goodbye to someone that's so well liked and so well known and revered and respected. But it also, there was a tinge of happiness because people knew all the good things that Senator Graham did for the state of South Carolina. Of course, we saw elected leaders here, Republicans, but of course there were also some Democrats here too, who had some encounters with them through the years and met him and spoke with him. And while there were various disagreements, of course, they also perhaps found some common ground on some ways to bring through some key pieces of legislation which could benefit South Carolina and, of course, the low country of South Carolina. As we mentioned before, Senator Graham was a man of faith. He belonged to Corinth Baptist Church in Seneca, not too far from his hometown there in Central, but his final funeral is going to be here just down the street at First Baptist Church, where I'm told he was a close friend of the church. I spoke with a church member last night, and she told me that Senator Graham would visit there for several years. He didn't go to church there all the time, but if he was in town for something, there was always an open invitation for him to go and say a prayer and take part in the 10 a.m. service that they had with the senior pastor there, Reverend West Church. Speaking of that, his funeral is going to be again at noon today, just about a half mile from here. My colleague Emily Deanne is standing by outside the church, and she is talking to various people that were either paying their respects or wanting to stop by and say a prayer for the late senator. Emily?
Bill, moments ago, a hush came over Hampton Street as the body of late Senator Graham arrived here on a horse-drawn carriage, followed by members of every branch of the military. His casket draped in that red, white, and blue, then picked up and carried across Hampton Street here behind me and up the stairs of the beautiful First Baptist Church here. Many people, hundreds of them, come outside to see his casket being brought in by those members of the armed forces. And as his body was being carried up those stairs, his family, including his sister Darlene, was onlooking with tears in their eyes. It was just a very somber moment here moments ago. And now we can see that the hearse has arrived, and after the noon service, his body will be brought to its final resting place where there'll be a private family burial service. But as we await here for the rest of the members of the public, his friends, his colleagues, his constituents that he represented for so many years, they're still making their way here for that noon celebration of life honoring the life of late Senator Graham.
All right, Emily, thank you. And we'll be checking back in with Emily and with Bill coming up. But we want to talk now with our political expert, Mark Owens, who is here with us. Yeah. I know you were here yesterday talking with Bill as we watched the funeral services unfold in Washington, D.C. Now the focus is here on our state. And you and I have been chatting as we've been watching this coverage. And, you know, he had a major impact that a lot of people may not realize on the local and state level, even though he served for so many years as, you know, a senator, and before that as a congressman.
Right. And it's important to think about, you know, the role of a senator. Sometimes we think, oh, it could just be the big money that's being brought back to the states, like the ports and the rivers. But it also speaks a lot to helping individuals get placed in federal governments across our state. So who's serving on commissions? Also, when we go to Washington, D.C., who's meeting with individuals? And that's important for our state. And so that's where we're going to hear a lot of personal reflections today. Number one, about connecting Columbia to Washington, D.C.
Well, and you know, Bill had mentioned this as well, that he really did cross party lines, a lot of bipartisan efforts. Yeah. James Clyburn is, you know, Congressman James Clyburn, a known Democrat, obviously, and he's going to be part of the celebration of service starting at noon today.
And that's been throughout the weeks. I mean, Representative Clyburn has talked about how often they work together, especially on things like a corridor of history and connections, of recognizing South Carolina and getting historical recognitions here from the national level. But also is going to be important when you think about that's a lasting legacy of Senator Graham, is working with Democratic presidents, working with Republican presidents. It wouldn't matter what your party was. It was just your constitutional office, whatever needed to be done to help people in South Carolina.
You know, we heard from his sister, who a lot of people, I think, admittedly didn't even know that he raised his sister while he was going to law school in Columbia at University of South Carolina, later adopted her, and then went on to obviously serve in the military and then serve as a senator for so long. But a lot of people may not realize that, you know, he was just so busy, and she mentioned that following his death, that we had interviews with her, and he was always on the go, always working. He had just gotten back from Ukraine prior to his sudden passing in Washington, D.C.
And that's one of those things when we think about how he could be connected to the rest of the world. And that's a certain part about no matter where we travel, someone's going to have a leader who knows where South Carolina is, primarily, though, if we think it's because of a connection to the person who was Senator Graham.
When we're watching, you know, so many people are there right now in Columbia to honor his life and legacy, and emotional moments, as you could see tears. We also saw some smiles, though, because he was easy to talk to. I had just interviewed him maybe about 2 months ago. We talked a lot about the war against Iran, as well as the Russia-Ukraine conflict that is ongoing. And he was easy to talk to, regardless of what side of the aisle you follow him.
Yeah. And maybe that's one word today, not to know. This is a moment, of course, to show respect, but also, maybe depending on how our families go, it's a moment to sort of laugh and celebrate a little bit. We heard jokes yesterday. It's a certain thing about knowing that his life was big and full. And so this is a place of home where he felt comfortable. Of course, having been to college, we're going to hear about some of the earlier years to his moments.
Yeah, a lot of family there right now. We know his parents had passed years ago, and so obviously that's why he went on then to raise his sister, and they were so close, that bond.
Yeah. And we heard yesterday, of course, the continuation of making sure that he was always there for those family members, right, in their difficulties, and that hit a lot to the passing. It's also to recognize for this, she is known, she's had a lot of service to our state, and they're a team. Right, yeah. And that's a certain part that's important to think about, the reflection that while he gets a lot of the name recognition, this is a family that's had a lot of service to the state.
Yeah, and you know, it's obviously very emotional here, and a lot of reflection right now. And you know, moving forward, it's just not time yet for that. But we'll be talking a lot about the race now to fill his seat, as that was his big goal, was then to be reelected come November, and so that's up in the air. But right now, the focus is just on looking back on his life and legacy. And we could talk for hours really about the impact that he had here in the Low Country, in our state, in D.C., and across the world.
Absolutely. I mean, it's going to take a long time to reflect on that, but also with a couple of the ways that he's being honored, especially with Joint Base Charleston, I think we're going to continue to see that. And it's just throughout the process, there's a foundation built from his service that other people can continue to work on in growing our state. But it does speak to our biggest moment that people knew him personally.
Yeah, taking a live look, you can see this is inside of First Baptist Church in Columbia. No doubt it will be a packed service as it gets set to start here in about 17 minutes. We do know that a lot of people are there this afternoon as that starts, and it'll begin at noon. We know we've talked with the Reverend earlier this morning, and we've been bringing you live coverage. Thank you for joining us this morning as we bring you live coverage of the celebration of life, honoring a life of service for former Senator Lindsey Graham, who died at the age of 71 on July 11th. Taking a live look throughout downtown Columbia as we watch the procession from the State House to the church, where again that service is set to start. I believe now we are sending it back to Bill Burr, who is live at the state capitol and has been watching and was there bright and early this morning. Bill, it was a busy morning, and you know, we can see inside the church, Bill, a look that you can't, but a lot of people obviously dressed in black, and we know it's expected to be packed since it is a public service.
That's right, Ashley. It really was crowded here on the grounds of the State House. I tried to do just not necessarily a head count per se, but I did take a look around. I saw, I would estimate probably 300 people at least on this side, and there could have been some people on the other side too, which I'm sure there were, maybe beyond where the other media tents are set up, because we have media here from all across the state and across the country, because this is such an important matter for South Carolinians. Senator Lindsey Graham, in office for a long time, made a big impact, and not just here in the state, but obviously on the national scale too. I heard an interesting factoid from former Governor Mark Sanford. He was giving a radio interview yesterday on 94.3 WSC, and he said in South Carolina there have only been 3 funerals since 1954 for U.S. senators, and that was Strom Thurmond, Fritz Hollings, and now Lindsey Graham. So this doesn't happen too often in South Carolina, and obviously we don't want to see it happen. But just Governor Sanford was just talking about just the reverence for the seat, and also talking about just how Senator Graham was joking with me a couple of years ago about how South Carolinians, they only change their politicians once every 30 or 40 years. But seriously though, you know, it is a big deal in South Carolina, and a lot of South Carolinians take it seriously, and when it comes to something like this, they want to pay their respects and pay homage to the people who serve them and serve them well.
Whoever gets the Republican nomination on August 11th or August 25th in the runoff, is it going to be close? Is it going to still be Republican? How do you see this shaping up?
I think that's a fascinating question, and to sort of add to the complexity of this, I think we need to recognize that for decades, turnover in these seats just did not happen.
No.
Right? Strom Thurmond has this seat for 50 years. Fritz Hollings, the Democrat, has his seat for decades. So it's not even a partisan thing. South Carolina just does not like turnover. They like to return their folks to the institutions. And so given the hyper-partisanship that we're in now, one has to wonder, is this a turning point in South Carolina politics? Will we expect to see maybe more turnover moving forward? You know, whether or not a Democrat takes that office, and I think that's going to be a very difficult prospect, just given the Republican dominance in this state. But even if the Republican candidate, whoever that nominee is, if they win in November, it's not clear to me if South Carolina is going to be as willing to return them to the Senate like they were for Lindsey Graham, for Fritz Hollins, for Strom Thurmond, even for Tim Scott right now. So that's going to be pretty fascinating to watch over the next several years.
Yeah, of course, we're still waiting for this this funeral service to begin here at First Baptist Church. Well, we will be hearing from Senator Tim Scott. We'll be hearing from Governor Henry McMaster, as well as former Congressman Trey Gowdy, as they pay tribute to their friend and lifelong servant of South Carolina, Lindsey Graham. Just remarkable to be witnessing. Again, life is short, life is fleeting. You know, we never know when our time is, but we thought that Graham probably had more time left in him, because you're talking about the Strom Thurmonds, you're talking about the Fritz Hollinses. I mean, but Strom was 100, I think Fritz was pushing 97 perhaps, like. And I think I mentioned earlier, Senator Graham would joke that he's genetically term limited. He's like, I don't think I'm going to be Strom Thurmond. And sadly, at 71, he proved that to be true because of his heart condition, similar to what his father had there. So he did as much as he could do in the time he did it. And President Trump said as much yesterday that he went out at the peak of his game. And he truly was. You know, when I was talking to him last October, when he gave me 30 minutes of his time, an incredible amount of time for such a busy man, he said, you know, I'm the best I've been. I feel healthy. I think I can do it. Like, I'm ready to go. I'm doing everything I can do as best as I can. So there's no reason why I shouldn't go. And of course, we all know that the ultimate
as well.
You know, for everybody who you might recognize spoke there, I think they all had a common theme that Senator Graham was their primary point of connection to whatever was going on in D.C., someone that they relied on and trusted. And I think that's interesting to have heard the personal stories that he was a source of information for a lot of individuals and what was Congress doing, but also the recognition that he had strength and grit, but softness, number one, that no matter what the moment was, it seemed like he always fit that spot.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt, sometimes polarizing, as he was, again, you know, one of President Trump's biggest supporters and defends most of Trump's actions. Yeah. But he really did have friendships across the aisle as well, here in our state and on the federal level too.
Yeah, and it's one of those things about his loyalty, right? That even if he was taking actions that were on behalf of, that was sort of seemed polarizing to the rest of the country, he would have this moment to be able to turn and connect that back to South Carolina and move in a different direction, right? With a different set of individuals. And that's a unique skill, which a number of individuals in Washington, D.C. have. Columbia has that. But it is to this idea of recognizing that that's part of why he was able to accomplish so much.
Well, and his background in law really certainly played a big role. He had a major impact, even when you look at our nation's highest court. He testified on behalf of Justice Brett Kavanaugh. A lot of people crediting him for his confirmation. So he was very vocal, even, you know, outside of lawmaking.
This is one of the, go back to his attention to committee work, was this idea that on the Judiciary Committee, he was able to be involved in the hearings of all this justices on the Supreme Court, except for Clarence Thomas was just a little bit before his time there. But you're looking in this moment of saying that, you know, he was the chair of the committee when it was moving through the confirmation process of Justice Amy Coney Barrett. He voted for President Obama's nominees to the court with Elena Kagan and Justice Sotomayor. It's an opportunity to know that he recognized people for the merit that they could provide as well.
When I interviewed him a couple of months ago, he was on the campaign trail, and he's just so full of energy, and he knows how to work a room, I would say. And it was kind of fun to really watch him have conversations with anyone. I overheard him talking with a farmer who was thanking him for all of his work trying to help our farmers here in our state. He was a big advocate of that. He talked about his work on budget, as well as a huge impact in protecting American democracy on the foreign level when it comes to our military efforts, given his military background.
And he had that ability, right? It's through service as the Judge Advocate General attorney. It's then continued that through the South Carolina Air Guard. You know, it's a really unique thing to be able to find so many shared experiences with the people in South Carolina, but also giving of his time and listening.
Dr. Mark Owens, thank you for joining us here. We're going to send it now to Emily Deanne, who is live at First Baptist Church as the service is getting ready to start at noon. Emily.
Ashley, here on Hampton Street, friends, family, colleagues, and constituents continue to arrive at First Baptist Church to pay their respects to the late Senator Graham, including many members of the military and, of course, our first responders. They're not only arriving here to keep us all safe here today, but they're arriving to pay their respects as well. You can see an entire fleet of South Carolina Law Enforcement Division state troopers arriving here. They're going to be heading inside First Baptist Church in just a moment. We have SWAT teams, we have K-9 units, members of Capitol Police, all here to keep us safe, but also to pay their respects to late Senator Graham and that funeral taking place, that celebration at noon today. We're standing by for that to happen. Ashley?
Well, Emily, I'll take it from here. That's okay. We'll talk to Ashley here in just a second. And just a quick wrap up here from our coverage from the State House grounds before the funeral begins. I mentioned earlier, not sure if you were able to hear me, but I did talk about the significant events that have taken place here at the State House through the years. I reached out to Wade Dorsey. He's the supervisor of reference services at the South Carolina Department of Archives and History. And he talked about the important people that have lain in state here at some point throughout the years, and he said it would be difficult to put together an entire list, but he did go back several years, and he talked about he went back to as far as 1986 when Solomon Blatt was a state lawmaker here, a very respected lawmaker, and his casket was brought here. He was a big name in politics back in that era. In fact, there's a building just around the corner from here that's named after him. Former state lawmaker and then Congressman Floyd Spence, when he passed away in 2001, his casket was brought here. Of course, Senator Strom Thurmond, when he passed away in 2003, Governor Carroll Campbell. I covered his administration when I worked in Florence and Myrtle Beach several years ago. When he passed in 2005, his casket was brought here. Reverend Clementa Pinckney was a state senator. Of course, unfortunately, he was one of the people that was killed in the church shooting at Mother Emanuel Church in downtown Charleston. A very respected member of the General Assembly. He was brought here after his passing so people could pay their respects. There were long lines of people during that time for him. When Senator Fritz Hollings passed away in 2019, he was brought here. Of course, he was a former governor and may have been a lieutenant governor here too, but he spent a lot of time in the State House in the General Assembly. And this person was not an elected official, but he was a civil rights leader, and that was the Reverend Jesse Jackson. Of course, from Greenville, South Carolina, born and raised here, and then moved on and did a whole host of things, but had a lot of connections to South Carolina in the civil rights movement. When he passed away earlier this year, special services were done here at the State House grounds for all the work that he had done through the years when it comes to civil rights and legislation, and also his efforts to remove the Confederate flag from the State House grounds. Just a few factoids here from the State House as we wrap up our coverage here of Senator Lindsey Graham's memorial here and the special observance here at the General Assembly. We're going to go to a quick commercial break, and then at noon we're going to go inside First Baptist Church. We're not going to do that. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop talking so I can send it back to the studio so we can wrap up our coverage here and then look back on the life of Senator Lindsey Graham.
All right, Bill, thank you. And I'm here with Dr. Mark Owens, our political expert, as we are watching and waiting for that funeral service to start in Columbia at noon, and bringing you some of the sights and sounds from earlier, the procession from the state capitol to that church just down the street. And, you know, Dr. Owens, I want to talk just about the political weight that really Senator Graham had. For the first time ever now, filling his seat, not for the first time ever, but for the first time in a long time. He was senator for 32 years. He replaced and took the spot after Senator Strom Thurmond, who held the Senate seat for 47 years. So these are two veteran senators and now a freshman coming in, and you know how important it is for them to be able to really be the voice of all of the constituents the way that Graham was able to be.
Yeah, well, one, I think you could look to this as that whoever the new person will be, look at it in the same way he could have. Senators are partners together. And so there'll be Senator Scott, who is a chair of the banking committee, but it also reaches to this there are a lot of open opportunities. South Carolina as a global player, this could be something that naturally fits into starting to look at foreign policy and having those interests, right? That's something where actually Senator Graham was able to grow into that throughout his career when Senator Hollings had retired. And so he was the chief appropriator of foreign affairs back then, and that when he retired, there was the opening. And so the opportunity to move into that, it's a real thing here where everything just has its pace, and someone realizes now the future that they can grow and kind of create in a career with long-term service. It did not come quickly, but that was the effort that continued to go into running for re-election and having a long-term vision for the state.
We are watching live right now inside of First Baptist Church as family, friends, colleagues, the community continue to trickle in as the service is set to start at noon. There was a flyover earlier from the F-16 aircraft from the 169th Fighter Wing at McEntire Joint National Guard Base. That was at 11 o'clock. We brought that to you live. If you're able to see that powerful moment, a lot of people may not realize that. Some people obviously know his military background, but he was on active duty for more than 6 years and then went on to serve the South Carolina Air National Guard as well, and he joined the Air National Guard where he served until 1995 there, and at one point did serve there at that base where the flyover wing unit was from. So that was a powerful moment earlier, and now we are waiting for the official public service to say goodbye to late Senator Graham to start here at noon in downtown Columbia. Emily Deanne is live at that church. As we just heard from Bill earlier, we've been bringing you live coverage of this historical day here in our state following the national goodbye at the U.S. Capitol yesterday, where we heard from the president, we heard from the vice president and other world leaders as well. Huge day yesterday, and again, now it is time to say goodbye here at home ahead of the private burial. That'll happen, Dr. Owens, in Pickens County, where he is from. He's from the town of Central.
Yeah.
Earlier, we got to hear from some of the people in that community who, they said kind of the same sentiment we've been hearing is it really doesn't matter what side of the aisle you were on. It's no doubt Graham will have a lasting impact on our state.
He will, and especially when you think they're at home, it's a recognition that those are the people who he grew up with, but also knew that they could go to Washington, D.C., right, to be with him, that he would come home. That was what the pastor shared so much of yesterday.
I believe we do want to bring you this live as it is set to start and listen in as the service begins here at First Baptist Church in downtown Columbia for late Senator Lindsey Graham, who died at the age of 71 on July 11th.
I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills. From whence cometh my help? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. Those ancient words from Psalm 121 have been recited for centuries by pilgrims traveling to Jerusalem. As they lifted their eyes towards the surrounding hills above the holy city, they reminded themselves that their confidence was never ultimately in kings or armies, in wealth or in power, in human wisdom or earthly achievement. Their help came from the Lord, the maker of heaven, the creator of the hills and the mountains, the giver of life. And our choir just echoed those same sentiment in this song, Total Praise. You are the source of my strength. You are the strength of my life. I lift my hands in total praise to you. There could scarcely be a more fitting way to begin this service as we remember a man who loved that land where these words from Psalm 121 were first recited, who devoted so much of his public life to the security of Israel and the city of Jerusalem, and who understood that even the strongest nations ultimately stand in need of the providence and the mercy of God Almighty. Governor McMaster, Secretary Bessent, Senator Scott, Congressmen, constitutional officers, elected officials, members of the judiciary, distinguished guests, friends, and people of God. On behalf of the First Baptist Church of Columbia, and especially on behalf of Senator Graham's family, welcome. Thank you for gathering today. Thank you for the many prayers and expressions of encouragement and of love over the last 2.5 weeks. We are here to give thanks to God for the life of Senator Lindsey Graham, and to affirm the sure hope that belongs to all who trust in Jesus Christ. It was just 31 days ago that Senator Graham was seated in this very sanctuary, just right back there, with his beloved sister, Darlene, their family. And he came here and in his typical humorous fashion said, "This is the highlight of my year to remind me what our country is all about through Baptists who can sing and dance." And he said, if you don't think Baptists can dance, you've never been to First Baptist Church. And then speaking of our nation's future, he delivered what became his last public comments in the state of South Carolina, reminding us of President Reagan's words that America is only one generation away from losing her freedom. Senator Graham then made this commitment. He said, America is not going to lose her freedom on our watch. That was more than a memorable line. It reflected the conviction that shaped his public life. So today, Darlene, to your family, to the devoted staff of Senator Graham, to countless friends who mourn with them today, we extend our deepest sympathy. We grieve with you, and we hold fast to the promise of our Lord who said, don't let your heart be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. I am going away to prepare a place for you. I will come again and take you to myself. Our Father in God, we lift our eyes to you today. For you alone are the source of our strength and the strength of our lives. We thank you for the life of Senator Lindsey Graham, for his faithful service to the state and nation, for his devotion to freedom, and for his love for the people that he represented. Today, God, we ask that you would especially draw near to Darlene, to every member of the Graham family, to his devoted staff, and to all who mourn his passing. Father, would you be their refuge? Would you be their comfort, a very present help in this moment of trouble? Remind them that you are the God who never slumbers nor sleeps, and that your mercies are new every morning. And as we remember this life, would you turn our own hearts towards the eternal realities that outlast every earthly office, every accomplishment, every honor. Fix our hope upon Jesus Christ, who conquered death through his cross and resurrection, and who gives everlasting life to all who trust in him. May everything that is said and done in this service honor Senator Graham's memory, comfort those who grieve, and above all else, bring glory to your name. And we ask these things through your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
From the Gospel of John 11:21 through 27. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha answered, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she replied. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world.
I had the honor and privilege of working for Senator Lindsey Graham, then Congressman Lindsey Graham, and even presidential candidate Lindsey Graham. That was a shorter campaign. For 25 years, he was my boss, my friend, my mentor. And a few years back, I called him and said, Senator, you know I've been going to seminary. God's moving me in a different direction, out of the campaign world and into ministry. And you're going to need to have a different campaign manager for your 26th reelection. And he paused for a second and said, Scott, do you not think what we do is important? And I said, Senator, it is. It's critically important. It's life and death at times, decisions. But Senator, it's not eternal. And he paused and said, I understand. Today, this passage from Revelation is eternal. Revelation 21, 2 through 7. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and will be their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. He who was seated on the throne said, I am making everything new. Then he said, write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. He said to me, it is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give water without cost from the spring of the water of life. Those who are victorious will inherit all this, and I will be their God, and they will be my children. Would you pray with me? Lord God Almighty, Good Shepherd, the resurrection and the life, the Alpha and the Omega, we thank you for this day. We thank you for our friend, Lindsey Graham. You gave us 71 incredible years with this man, and we are so grateful. You only made one like him, for sure. And we're grateful that we were blessed by his presence. Our state, our country were impacted by what he did. God, thank you for just your providential hand guiding him for all those years, working out all those things, and putting him at the right place at the right time to do what you wanted to get done. Because we know from your word, you put our leaders in place. And we're so grateful to have been part of his team, to have been part of his friend, to just have known him. Lord God, the work is not done. And as he said to me that day, don't you think it's important? And it is. And so we pray for our leaders. We pray especially for Darlene in this new role and her family. God, give her strength to stand, to fight, to be there, to show up day after day to do your will. We love you, and we are so honored by our friend and all that he meant to us. Lord, sear in our minds this day the impact that he had on so many people. We are grateful. And God, we know from your word that those who believe and trust in you, Jesus, will be reunited, and every tear will be wiped away. We look forward to the day where we see our brother again, Lindsey Graham, with you, Jesus, bowing at your feet. We love you and thank you, and it's in your name we pray. Amen.
The Bible tells us that by grace you're saved through faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. So we're going to sing together Amazing Grace, and shall we stand as we sing?
That was wonderful. We're all awake. I want to thank the family, Darlene, for inviting me for this very special moment for a lot of us. We meet in sadness over the loss of one of South Carolina's greatest sons, but also to celebrate this poor boy from a little town in South Carolina, as he called himself, to celebrate what he accomplished through grit, determination, character, for his state, his country, and the world. His impact was enormous, and I'm confident, as are you, that there will never be another Lindsey Graham. He recognized the greatness of America and her obligations in a dangerous world. Lindsey Graham recognized the seriousness of his work, but also the value of humor and a lighthearted spirit. Lindsey Graham understood the hopes and dreams and needs of his state and delivered every time. Presidents, paupers, famous or forgotten, he treated everybody the same. We have seen him attack evil and injustice and embrace friendship and the common good, all with equal fervor. You know, the psychologists tell us that when we grieve for lost friends or loved ones, part of our sorrow is for ourselves. In a melancholy reflection on missed opportunities, mistakes, roads not taken, in short, wasted time. I don't think Lindsey wasted any time. I have really never seen him sitting still. An old farmer once said of somebody, he said, the boy is either going somewhere, getting back, or going again. And that's Lindsey. We may ask ourselves at times like this, where will I be when I get where I'm going? We never know. We never know how any particular event might influence the next event and the next and the next. You'll remember comedians Dan Rowan and Dick Martin hilariously joked on their TV show Laugh-In about the fickle finger of fate. Lindsey felt that finger of fate. As the first in his family to attend college, soon to lose his mother at 20 years old, then his father 15 years later, with his little sister Darlene at 13, becoming his responsibility. Lindsey Graham would have been the last person on earth to imagine that he would graduate from law school, be elected to the United States Senate, travel the world in service of his great country, earn the respect and confidence of world leaders, and become the ally, friend, and even golfing partner of the President of the United States. But he did it all, and he did it with his sense of humor, humility, and integrity intact the whole time. Three little stories. I remember being on the campaign bus with Lindsey and Senator John McCain leading up to the 2000 election. There was a show, it's called the Ali G Show on TV. Maybe y'all remember it. It was had a character named Borat who was a reporter. The episodes were absolutely ridiculous. As the bus rolled along, Lindsey would invariably begin retelling those scenes, acting them out, first through chuckles, then laughing, until finally his words became incoherent, by which time Senator McCain would be in hysterics. Peals of laughter were engulfing the ever-cynical consultants and reporters in the back of the bus, and it was something I will never forget, the sight. The respect, love, and pure, unabashed joy shared by those two remarkable men. I also remember being in a crowded conference room one time in the White House a few years ago with President Trump, Lindsey, Senator Tim Scott, Congressman Joe Wilson, Attorney General Alan Wilson, and the various Department of Energy officials and staff. What was the subject? It was a hot day. The department's wholly unsatisfactory performance in promising but not removing plutonium from the Savannah River site in South Carolina. The room was tense. The top DOE official made a bold statement about how their great progress was going along in removing that plutonium, which Lindsey, who was sitting next to the president, perceived as highly inaccurate, I'll say. And he said so in loud, plain language. As younger staff members tried to disappear into the walls, the president reached over, patted Lindsey on the arm, and with a twinkle in his eye said, "Maybe you should calm down a little bit, Lindsey." Lindsey quickly replied, "Thank you, Mr. President. That's quite a comment coming from you." Everybody except the Department of Energy officials loved it. Here's another one. Is in 2002, Lindsey was elected senator. Mark Sanford was elected governor. I was elected attorney general. Lindsey took his oath before we did on January the 7th in Washington. Mark and I would take ours at the State House later on Wednesday, January the 15th, along with the other constitutional officers. We all assembled just before noon in the State House. Protocol provided that all the participants would gather in the library up in the top to be announced in turn and proceed out down the steps to their seats for the ceremony. When the names were announced in sequence, Senior Senator Fritz Hollings and then brand new Senator Lindsey Graham emerged under the portico of the top of the steps of the State House. Ours being mostly a Republican state then and now, Senator Hollings, a longtime Democrat, received noticeably polite applause. As it began to subside, Lindsey's name was announced, and as applause immediately began to swell, Lindsey reached over and grabbed Senator Hollings' hand, and they raised it high with his own. So there we were, if you get this picture, our two U.S. senators, hands held high, waving to the crowd when the thunderous applause washed over both of them. I believe that not many men would have done what Lindsey did. I recite those instances, and I have one more that came to mind. I was sitting next to Congressman Clyburn. South Carolina was in a contest with the rest of the country for some major funds to help us be innovative in our technology. South Carolina decided on energy. We need energy. And we were working at about 300 applications. It'd be narrowed down to 12 states would get this money. So we worked, and we got notice that we were maybe down to about 30. Finally, we realized they told us we were one of the 12 that was going to get the money. It's $48 million, I think, a year. Well, what did we do? We ended up, I was on my phone in my office in Columbia. Lindsey was on his phone, I think, in Washington. And Congressman Clyburn was on his phone in Washington. And Secretary Gina Raimondo, Secretary of Commerce under President Biden, was on her phone, I presume, in Washington. And we talked and we made the case. Each in our turn said something. Finally, towards the end of the conversation, Lindsey started cutting up as usual. It ended up being a very happy phone call. And we didn't find out then, but we found out later that we would get the grant. But at the end of that conversation, Secretary Raimondo said something I found very interesting. She said, "Gentlemen, this is the first time since I've been in this office that I have had a bipartisan conversation." To which I said, "That's the way we do it in South Carolina." Lindsey was at the forefront of that type of approach to life. I recite all these instances just to present the picture of a man I would describe as a full-fledged son of South Carolina, a man of genuine happiness, dedicated to his state and devoted to his friends and to his family. Yet, a man who, to protect the people of his state or in response to injustice, could bring forth a torrent of ferocious firepower as great as any battleship. We saw a glimpse of this, all of us did, on television when Brett Kavanaugh was under unfair attack in his Supreme Court justice hearing. Today, it is in our 250-year anniversary since the birth of our nation, through a violent revolution, I am confident that South Carolina's great leader, Christopher Gadsden, general, statesman, and creator of the Don't Tread on Me flag, would be very proud of Lindsey Graham. I know I am, and I know that you are. I know that people all over the world are, and we are deeply grateful for the life of this poor boy from a little town in South Carolina. We have great music in this church. My church is down the street, but this church got great music, so is mine. We don't have 500 people in the choir, though. If the singer-songwriter Vince Gill were here, y'all maybe know the song. I bet I know what he would say. He'd say, "Go rest high on that mountain. Son, your work on earth is done. Go to heaven a-shouting, love for the Father and the Son." We love you, Lindsey. Goodbye. Until we meet again.
It is good to be home in South Carolina. We love when the world celebrates our heroes, but it is so good to come home to South Carolina. I miss home. And when we feel pain in our hearts, Richard, we need to be home, surrounded by people who love us, who know us, who care for us. We are deeply, deeply sorry for your loss. To the Graham staffers, thank you. Thank you for stepping up to the plate. Thank you for protecting and insulating the Graham family. Thank you for going the extra mile. It has been a long 2+ weeks. To the Graham family, may the Lord continue to bless you with the strength and the courage that you need to pull together, because this celebration will end in the next day or 2 or 3, but the wounds won't go away so quickly. I know you'll be there for each other. Darlene, what a powerful, grace-filled person. To watch you under immense pressure show up and show out is a blessing to South Carolina. I see we've got some Presbyterians over here. Praise the Lord, hallelujah. That was good, that's good. Hey, even the Presbyterians step up here and dance in the Baptist church. Someone should say amen. Never mind. It is good to be here. I haven't been here in a couple of years, and we certainly miss Pastor Estep, but it's good to see him here. I will simply say this, that I am going to miss my friend, Lindsey Graham. The congressmember who becomes a senator, who becomes a world leader, statesman without any question. I am going to miss my friend, Lindsey Graham. And I'll remember Lindsey had great humor and a lot of wit too, right? And so I'll never forget at my wedding, this Monday will be 2 years ago, sweetheart. I remember our anniversary is coming up on August the 3rd. Always helpful to remember that. Lindsey's at our wedding. I only invited 3 or 4 senators, and Lindsey's talking to this little kid named Case, and Case is in the arms of one of the parents, and Lindsey leans in and says, "Case, I'm so sorry, buddy. There will be no Social Security for you." Sean, it really happened, brother. It really happened. It was the kind of moment that everybody just, all the adults bursted out laughing. And poor little Case is like, "What Social Security?" President Trump talked about this yesterday, but I think it's worth repeating. I started a South Carolina prayer breakfast in D.C., and I will tell you that my first call 15 years ago was to Lindsey Graham. And at that time, I did not know that Lindsey, much like myself, we really don't like mornings. And so I called Lindsey and said, Lindsey, I need you to be there at my prayer breakfast at 8:30 a.m. Lindsey said, have you ever thought about having a prayer lunch or a prayer dinner? I was like, Lindsey's already said, man, I need you there. And he said, I ain't coming. If Jesus comes before 10 a.m., I am not going to be there. But Lindsey committed to his friends, did what I hadn't seen him do since then. At 8:31 a.m., Lindsey walks through the door because Lindsey Graham was always committed to his friends, even if it was uncomfortable for him. I did not realize, however, that Lindsey gave lots of advice to kids. This was a new revelation for me. I was talking to Katie Britt, who has 2 young kids, and she told me that Lindsey actually gave her, Trey, legal advice. The head of the Judiciary Committee giving legal advice to a pretty good attorney in her own right. I had to write this down because I just didn't believe it. I said, well, what did he say? Well, the legal advice he gave to her 2 kids is simply this. All the kids in the room, listen to most of it. Don't sell drugs on school property because the enhanced sentencing guidelines is not worth the risk. That's good advice, but wow, right? Second advice he gave, not legal advice, was simply this. Kids, never do for yourself what someone else will do for you. Third piece of advice, he said, get away with as much as you can for as long as you can. And then one of my personal favorites, I practiced this while I was in school myself. He said, don't work too hard, just pull your friends down. Wow, that's really good advice. Having failed a couple subjects in high school, Spanish and English, I learned how to do that firsthand. But the advice I most appreciate from Lindsey, he never spoke to me. He lived it. First piece of advice, and I hope that it helps you too. Number 1, get really comfortable being yourself. Get really comfortable being yourself. But in order to get comfortable being yourself, he would say, through his actions and not his words, you've got to know yourself. Know why God created you. Jeremiah 1:5 reminds us that God made Jeremiah a prophet before he was even in his mother's womb. Sometimes to be yourself and comfortable in your own skin, you've got to walk alone. God doesn't want carbon copies. Lindsey was an original. And I would challenge each of us to honor Lindsey Graham by living as originals. God's imprint on each of us, unique and specific. It reminds me of Romans 12:2, to know the acceptable and perfect will of God. Second lesson that he demonstrated, I actually like when, if you're not a pastor, the kind of sermon I like to hear is the one that I can only hear with my eyes and feel in my heart. Second one was simply this: learn to stand up for those who can't stand for themselves. Over 60 million Americans will never have their little feet on the soils of our country. Lindsey Graham always fought for life. He was 100% pro-life when it was convenient and when it was not. And he never apologized for it. If you want to have a conversation about the special needs kids, or if you want to have a conversation about the poor, Lindsey Graham always, according to Proverbs 31:8, stand up for those who can't stand for themselves. Lindsey embodied the spirit of that verse, and he did it every single day in a way that you didn't have to hear it because you could see it all the time. And finally, Romans 10:9 and 10. You see, I am going to miss Lindsey. But when I get to heaven, it will feel like for just seconds. Because I know eternity is real. And Romans 10:9 and 10 reminds me that if we confess with our hearts and believe, if we confess with our mouth and believe in our hearts that Christ was raised from the dead, you shall be saved. And if you're saved, you get the benefit of spending eternity with the ones you love the most, like Lindsey Graham. And I will tell you, having watched the sermon every day, and I will concede sometimes the sermon would come in colorful language, not found in 2 Timothy 1:7, or maybe 3 Timothy, which there is no 3 Timothy, but it's colorful language sometimes. But Lindsey was always authentically himself. He always found time to fight for the underdog. And we now all know that he believed in the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords and the Alpha and the Omega. Let's make sure we spend eternity with God Almighty, whose Son is Jesus, and our good friends like Lindsey Graham.
Darlene, thank you for giving me the honor of honoring your brother. You know, yesterday the world said goodbye to Lindsey Graham in a beautiful 4-hour church service. The silver lining was that is the longest period of time Lindsey Graham had ever been in church. I want to thank you for being here to honor the life and legacy of, you know, I just never could call him Chairman Graham. He never wanted to be called Chairman Graham. He wanted to be Lindsey's. I want to thank you for being, we have so many dignitaries, so many people from, famous people from television. We have so many elected officials. We have judges. And I can tell you right now, he would be looking down on us, wondering why there weren't more people here and why Governor McMaster had not already named the city of Columbia after him. Both Governor McMaster and Senator Scott put their finger on it. The reason Lindsey resonated with us is because he was us. This undersized kid who was not born with a silver spoon in his mouth, but he was born with a plastic fork in his mouth in central South Carolina. But with wit and determination and hard work, your fellow citizens will trust you to represent them. That is the story of America. It is the story of South Carolina, that we punch above our weight. This kid from central South Carolina, Darlene, whose parents y'all buried far too early, rose to be mourned by world leaders, friends with presidents, chosen by his people. This lawyer from a small upstate law firm would be responsible for picking Supreme Court justices. Lindsey Graham is a metaphor for us, for the country, for our state. You know, our friendship began the way all really beautiful, powerful friendships began. He endorsed my opponent when I ran for Congress the first time. I'm not kidding. I wish I was. You know, a lot of politicians, they joke. They say, I'll do whatever helps you more. I'll endorse you or I'll endorse your opponent. Lindsey wasn't joking. He endorsed my opponent. After we narrowly eked out a victory and my wife is picking the confetti out of my pomade on election night, the very first phone call I got was from Lindsey Graham. He said, I will be the best friend that you have in Washington, D.C. And I'll be doggone, then Congressman Scott, if he was not. He helped us with committee assignments. He helped us navigate the waters of Washington. He never looked at us and saw a competitor. He looked at us and saw a fellow South Carolinian that needed some help. The things that that man did for me that no one else could have done. He introduced me to a guy named Bono. He pronounced it Bono. He couldn't tell you a single song U2 had ever recorded or written, but he knew that I was a fan of U2, and I wanted to meet Bono. 5 different times I got to be in the room with a guy named Paul Hewson, also known as Bono, because Lindsey Graham thought enough to think about a lowly House member and invite him over to the Senate. And you know what they were talking about? It certainly wasn't about music. And it wasn't about the earrings that Bono had. They were talking about children in Africa who needed drugs, they needed medicine, and they needed food. Sometimes in this world that we find ourselves in, 99 is a failing grade. Not with Lindsey Graham. If he could find one thing that he agreed with you on, that's what he put his energies in. And with Bono, it was children in Africa. And I got to tell you this, and my colleagues will back me up, how many different times did that man say, look, this is a tough vote. I'm going to vote yes. But y'all ought to vote no. It's better for your political career. I'm taking some risk, and I'm going to get some flack. But you need to do what is best for you, and I am going to do what is best for my beloved state of South Carolina. And he cast some really tough votes. I never met a less pretentious person in my life than Lindsey Graham. It wasn't the trappings of office that he cared about, it was the work. And there is some bitter symmetry to the fact that it was work that he lived for, Darlene, but I am convinced that it is work that took him from us. On those long trains and this plane ride to Ukraine, not because, as the media tells us, he loved war, but because blessed are the peacemakers. People had it wrong about Lindsey Graham. Was he willing to go to war? Yes, as a last resort. Blessed are the peacemakers. He was on a trip, what turned out to be his last trip, trying to broker peace in a war where hundreds of thousands of people had lost their lives. For those D.C. reporters who believe that Lindsey lacked convictions, I can assure you he did not, because I witnessed several of them. Andrew King is here. Andrew, Richard Perry, Van Cato. I can't even call you staff. You were not staff to him. You were family to him. You were the sons that he did not have. And we endured a lot together. So far in life, the 4 of us have never shared a prison cell. There's still time, but we haven't done it. Not prisoners of war. But we shared a golf cart with him, and we played golf with him, and I'm not sure there's that much difference between the three. The convictions that Lindsey Graham had that come to mind immediately is he had an almost religious aversion to using what we call a rangefinder. If you are familiar with golf, it tells you what the yardage is, so you don't have to ask somebody else 15 times, how many yards do I have? He had a deeply held conviction against using hearing aids. And Sean and Ansley, he had a really deeply held conviction against the memory supplements that we sell on Fox News during commercial breaks. Because I'm just going to give you a glimpse of what playing golf with Lindsey Graham was like. So he would tee off having hit no warm-up shots whatsoever, and it would go so far left that I think geometrically it may have actually been right. I think you could walk either direction and you would find the ball at the same time. And he would say, you know, hey, Trey, go get that golf ball for me. And I would say, Chairman, I love you to death, but there's a reason my wife and I left the church we were at in Spartanburg. I don't like snakes. I am not going to look for your golf ball. And he said, well, I'll just drop one out in the fairway with you. He said, how far do I have? 168 yards. First two times you ever said anything to Lindsey Graham were just for fun. He didn't hear him. 168 yards. How far I got? 168 yards, Chairman. 68? How did you get to be the chairman of budget? 168 yards. What do you think I ought to hit? Whatever goes 168 yards, Lindsey, I don't have any idea. I'm going to hit a pitching wedge. Well, if we were hitting off of the top of Mount Everest, yes, you should hit a pitching wedge. Lindsey, you don't hit a 168-yard pitching wedge. Times that by 18, times how many rounds of golf I was privileged to play with that man. You know, senators and federal judges have slightly different rules when it comes to golf. The first one that comes to mind is they don't pay their debts. You can tell that I don't practice law anymore because there's some judges here and they probably don't find that as funny as I do. But Lindsey was turning over a new leaf. I played about a month ago with a guy named John Ratcliffe, who's our CIA director, and Johnny and I somehow managed to eke out like a 6-up victory over Lindsey and his partner, and Lindsey decided to pay. So he brings out this crumpled up, probably counterfeit $20 bill out of his pocket, and he hands it to John Ratcliffe. Ratcliffe's on a government salary. He took it. I handed it back to him. I said, look, Fox is great to me. Plus, Lindsey, honestly, that would buy you 2 brand new suits. You need to keep that $20 bill. He told me he was going to run for president. Scott, my reaction was not unlike yours. But I said, let me hear you out. And he said, well, you tell me, what do I need to do to be more competitive in a presidential race? And I said, you need to get married, Senator Graham. And he said, well, there's some things I'm just not willing to do, Trey, even if it means not being the president of the United States. And I don't know if y'all knew this or not. I mean, the media never talks about it. Lindsey actually wasn't married. Did y'all know that? The media never brings that up, but they never get right why he was never married. I know why he was never married. I sat through a wedding ceremony with him. I know why he was not married. I sat through their wedding ceremony with Lindsey Graham. He shows up at the church, Seacoast in Charleston. He asked my wife and I to wait on him because he was running just a tad bit late. He showed up in cargo pants and a shirt, like a T-shirt. And my wife, who's the sweetest human being on the face of the earth, said, you know, Chairman Graham, would you like us to wait while you change? And he said, change what? I mean, you can barely see the stains. No, I can't see the stains, Lindsey, but I can see the Dale Earnhardt logo on your shirt. Well, he wasn't going to go change, so we finally work our way in there to the beautiful wedding of Tim and Mindy Scott, and it was gorgeous. It was a beautiful wedding. But you cannot see 2 deaf people beside each other at a wedding. So my wife figured that out, and she sat in between us, which was a tragic mistake in hindsight. So for those who are wondering why Lindsey Graham was never married, there's not a chance in the world that he would have made it through the wedding vows, because he didn't make it through Tim and Mindy's. When the pastor got to for better or worse, Lindsey whispered to me like an F5 tornado, like, how sick are we talking about? You mean like seasonal allergies? You mean a cold? And my wife's trying to get us both to calm down, and then they get to for richer, for poor, and you can imagine what his reaction to that was. Tim, don't do it. Negotiate. Let me go start another gang up in Washington and get you a better deal. So you have no idea how hard it is to get kicked out of a wedding, but we managed to do it. He loved, I cannot use the word staff. I cannot. Y'all have been so amazing the last 2 weeks. Darlene, you have one of the best group of people that's ever been assembled in South Carolina and Washington. I cannot call them staff. They were family to him. And old Richard Perry, God bless him, he's been with Lindsey since the earth cooled. And how many difficult conversations has Richard had? You know, the first time Lindsey ran for Senate, he sat Richard down and said, Richard, 31% of the people in this state are not going to vote for me no matter what. You don't need to worry about it. Don't even try. Richard's sitting there scratching his head thinking, well, I mean, we can try, can't we? I mean, do you have to give up on 31%? Don't worry about it. 6 years later, Lindsey's running for re-election. He says, Richard, 42% of the people in this state are not going to vote for me no matter what. Well, Richard's a smart guy. He sees things are not going in the right direction. And then this last go around, Lindsey said, Richard, 49% of the people in this state are not going to vote for me no matter what. That man had incredible self-awareness. He knew who he was. Tim and I looked at polls, and we see that we're like double-digit disapproval, and we're on the phone with our therapist. Lindsey sees 55-45, and he thinks he's got 5 points to play with. Was he high profile? Yes. He just never acted like it. He treated the boys that parked the golf carts exactly the same as he did the men who owned the golf course. I walked through a lot of airports with Lindsey Graham. He never failed to stop to thank someone in uniform. And for a man that did not have biological children, he sure followed the teachings of another famous man who did not have biological children by the name of Jesus. I'm on a driving range with Van Cato, and I hear Lindsey talking in a voice that I have never heard him talk in before. It was sympathetic, empathetic, and I think, what has happened to my friend? And Van politely tells me he is talking to a child who's getting ready to have surgery. And he was speaking like he was the parent of 12 children. Lindsey Graham was the least pretentious person I have ever seen in politics. Speaking of that prayer breakfast, I was going to let it go, but I can't. You know, I should listen to my wife. She said, let that one go, Trey. I can't do it, honey. I'm sorry. Yes, Tim Scott had a prayer breakfast. And there for a while, I mean, back when I was there wasn't any talk about your personal sex life at the prayer breakfast. That came later after I left. So Lindsey was sometimes, that's not true. Lindsey was always late. It wasn't sometimes late, he was always late. And Tim had just finished a beautiful sermon, and I was so lucky I had two senators that quoted the Bible. One of them got it right, and one of them wasn't even close. So Tim asked us to share our favorite Bible verse, and Lindsey stood up there and shared his, and I whispered to Tim, that's actually a line from the movie Gladiator. That's not a Bible verse, but... And then that small county lawyer wowed the jury like I've never seen a preacher do, with the authenticity, the sincerity of his message, the humility of his message. He did more for the cause of Christ without being able to cite a Bible verse, just with the authentic way that he presented his relationship with Christ. You know, there are a few things in life less relevant than a former member of Congress. And you do wonder, is anybody going to return these telephone calls? Anybody ever going to call you? When you leave, you go through a period where you just question your relevance. My two senators would not allow that to happen. That man will preach my funeral. And Lindsey Graham spent more time with me after I left the House than when I was his colleague in the House. He took me on trips with him. He took me to see the President of the United States with him. I played more golf with him when I was a non-member of anything than I ever did when I was actually in a position where I could help him. To my friends in the media, or to those on social media, and boy, if I could go back in time and change one thing, I would never have gotten Lindsey an iPhone. I would have kept that flip phone, and whoever taught him how to use X, there's a special place in purgatory for you. I got to tell to all of Lindsey Graham's critics, he never hated you back. If your goal was for him to treat you the way that some people treated him, you failed. He was the worst at carrying a grudge. I had to keep a list of who we were mad at because he could not remember who had done what. And what speaks to the love and the forgiveness of Christ more than not carrying a grudge? Yeah, I saw him cry one time. I saw him get teary-eyed one time, and I saw him cry one time. Darlene, he cried at his retirement ceremony from the Air Force because he loved wearing the uniform of his country. He felt like he was part of something. He had a camaraderie, a esprit de corps. He had brothers. And Darlene, I saw him get misty-eyed almost every time your name came up, and you don't doubt that he loved you, but I will tell you, even before I really got to know you, I knew one thing about Lindsey Graham, that he loved his baby sister. We were on the 16th tee box at the Country Club of Spartanburg, and I saw Lindsey running back. Well, that's not true. I saw Lindsey jogging back. Let me get this. He was briskly walking back to the 15th green because he had forgotten something. And I thought it was the quarter that he marked his ball with because that could get him to move pretty quick, but that's not what it was. He had forgotten the putter that your father gave him. And he came back to the 16th tee box, and I'm standing there, Larry, with my son, and he says, and he was misty-eyed, there are three things that matter to me in my life. This putter, because my father gave it to me. The class ring that my mama bought for me. And my baby sister, Darlene. And that was it. He liked you as much as any brother can like someone who marries their baby sister. That's the nicest way I can put it for you. If only I had known that July 3rd, when our son and you and Lindsey and I played that round of golf, that it would be the last time I would ever see. If only I'd known. But we don't know, and that's kind of the point, isn't it? That's what Lindsey would tell us. Folks, I was talking to Sean Hannity, and Sean said, what do you think Lindsey would say if he was speaking at our service? And I said, well, Sean, they'd have to beam him in from Saudi Arabia. He wouldn't be at our service. Are you kidding me? But if he were to be beamed in, he would say, those flowers are beautiful. I would love to have seen them when I still could. Send the flowers when people can see them. And he would be so overwhelmed with the outpouring of love that has been visited upon him and his legacy and his family over the last 2 weeks. He'd be overwhelmed. But my heart breaks because he didn't get to hear more of it when he actually could have heard it. So what Lindsey would say is send flowers to people when they can still smell them. And tell people you love them when they can still hear you. Last thing he said to me, Larry, you were in the parking lot, I was in the parking lot. He just was with one of my children, but he said, tell the other child, Abigail, hello, tell Terry hello. He loved my wife. He loved my wife. And I will call you when I get home. That's the last word that crossed his lips to me was home. Lindsey, you are home. Literally, figuratively, you are back in your beloved South Carolina, and you will soon be laid to rest in your hometown. You know, in conclusion, Lindsey was fascinated with life after Congress, probably because he knew he would never experience it. He would be walking the halls of the Senate until he was taken home by the Lord. So he was fascinated, Sean, that people would pay us to read a teleprompter. He was fascinated that people would actually pay to hear the same boring speech that we gave for free when we were members of Congress. So we spent a lot of time talking about what life after Congress was like, because he never would have gotten to experience it. And he knew this. I gave 95 speeches. I've given 95 speeches since I left. Different states, different groups, different topics. One common denominator. Started every one of them with a joke about Lindsey Graham. You only pick on people that you love, so I wanted there to be no doubt that I love that man. So I won't tell the joke, but I will never tell it again. I will give you a glimpse, and then we will draw this to an end. I tell this joke about 3 of my friends going to heaven and violating the rules of heaven. John Boehner was one of them. He broke into a CVS and stole some cigarettes and some self-tanning lotion, and he was chained to Roseanne Barr. And then I said Marco Rubio violated the rules of heaven. He broke into Mary Magdalene's apartment to steal some high-heel boots in case he ever ran for president again. And he was chained to Richard Simmons with a 3-foot-long chain. And then the punchline is, and then I see my friend Lindsey Graham, and he's chained to Cindy Crawford. And in a voice as loud as thunder, I hear, Cindy Crawford, you have violated the rules of heaven, and this is your punishment for all of eternity. And I never once had that joke not work. And I will never again tell it. Because he's not chained to anybody. He is in the arms of his Lord and Savior. He is surrounded by the love of his parents, Darlene. And he is home. He is home. Lindsey, I loved you. You made me laugh. You made me think. Maybe you want to jump out of airplanes. You got me fined by the FCC when you came on my show. And you have made me cry a lot over the last 2 weeks. But I want you to know, brother, that your name will echo through the halls of history. In your state and your country, they loved you. In your family and your friends, they loved you. And I wish you could have been here to listen to how much people loved and respected you. I will do what you would have wanted me to do, which is take care of your sister. That is all you would have asked me to do. Take care of your sister. And that is what I will do. And then one day I will see you again, and we can laugh and we can fight. And we'll do it forever and all of eternity. And until that day, I will miss you with my whole heart. God bless you, brother.
Thank you, choir. Steve, orchestra, magnificent as always. Darlene, I've prayed for you every night since your brother died. And I watched the service at the Rotunda yesterday. I was amazed by the strength and the grace that God gave to you. I'm very proud of you. When Senator Graham died, the world lost a friend, but we lost a member of the family. He loved South Carolina. You've heard that repeatedly these last several days. He told me not long ago, he said, you know, I think I'm old enough now and experienced enough now that I can be a good senator for the people. And that's what he wanted. He wanted to represent well the people of the state that he loved. After his death, I remember reading several different articles. And one of the things that caught my attention is that it said that his net worth was $1.4 million. I read that and I thought, that must not be right. I read it again and it said the same thing, $1.4 million. And I thought, he's been up there for 30 years. What's he been doing? I mean, I know other people have gone to Washington, and after they're there for a while, they have $20, $30, $50 million. Maybe he should have taken a course at Darlin Moore's School of Business. But see, that was Senator Graham. It was never about him. It was about us. He didn't go to Washington to enrich himself. He went to Washington to make life better and safer for us and for America. He loved this state, and we lost a brother. As Trey said just a moment ago, he was a peacemaker. There's a difference between a peace lover and a peacemaker. A peace lover cherishes peace, but a peacemaker works to make peace. He was serious, but he had a wonderful sense of humor. I remember early in my ministry, I began to notice that the people who influenced my life most were older pastors, older preachers. And I began to wonder, why is that? Why the older pastors rather than my contemporaries? And this is my conclusion. The older pastors seem to take the gospel seriously, but not themselves. And that was Senator Graham. He took his work seriously, but not himself. He called me one day when I was pastor of this church and said, Wendell, do you want to play golf at Augusta National? Well, I'd given up on that idea long ago. I said, are you serious? He said, yeah, I'm serious. You want to play? And I said, you tell me the date and the time and I'll be there. He said, well, I'm looking at Easter Sunday. I thought about it for a minute or two, and I said, I think I can work it out. We did play. It wasn't on Easter, thankfully. I have some deacons that didn't play golf, and they probably wouldn't understand that. We did play. It just wasn't on Easter Sunday. When we received news that he had passed, we were shocked. We didn't understand it. I mean, what just happened? We weren't expecting that. You know, when I was young, I thought for every question there was an answer, and I normally had the answers to the questions. As I got older, I began to realize there are a lot of questions to which there are no easy answers. Solomon was the wisest man in the world, but he was not omniscient. There were things that he didn't know, he didn't understand. David didn't understand the prosperity of the wicked and the suffering of good people. And he said in Psalm 73, behold, these are the wicked and always at ease. They have increased in wealth. Surely in vain I have kept my heart pure and washed my hands in innocence. We have questions when death comes to those we love. My dad died at 43, and I didn't understand it. He was a good man. He knew God. He was a deacon in the church. He loved my mother. He was a good father. I didn't understand it. I still don't. There are questions to which we have no answers. We don't really understand the senator's passing at such a young age. Wasn't expected. He was here a couple of weeks before he died at Celebration of Liberty. And we were talking. I said, Senator, you look great. You've lost weight. You really look good. And he said, I'm getting ready for the next 6 years. He wasn't expecting to be here like this. Death comes and we don't always have the answers as to why. What I hope to do today, and I'm going to do it as briefly as I can, what I hope to do today is to encourage you from the Word of God. And the passage of Scripture I'm going to read is Isaiah chapter 6, beginning in verse 1. In the year that Uzziah died, I saw the Lord seated on a high and lofty throne, and his robe filled the temple. Seraphim were standing above him. Each one had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one called to another, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. His glory fills the whole earth. I'm going to refer to 8 verses, and in those 8 verses, there are 3 actions. Isaiah said, I saw, I said, I heard. First of all, he said, I saw the Lord sitting on the throne. This was a devastating time for the people of Judah. Uzziah the king had died. They were desperate. They didn't know what the future held for them. They didn't know what was going to happen in Judah. So they were desperate. That was the thing that drove Isaiah to the temple. And he said when he was there, he said, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne. The word for Lord that is used there is not Yahweh, which speaks of his essence. It is Adonai, which speaks of his dominion. He is saying, I saw the Lord who is sovereign, the sovereign God. That's a good word for us, because there's a sense in which we are a little bit confused. We're not sure. And we need to see again a sovereign God. You see, when sickness looms, he's sitting on his throne. When fear threatens us, he is on the throne. When doubt questions us, he is on the throne. And when death comes, he is on the throne. I think the Apostle Paul understood that, because when Paul was facing the executioner, he wrote to Timothy and he said, Timothy, the time of my departure is at hand. I fought a good fight, kept the faith, finished my course. Henceforth there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give me at that day, but not to me only, to all those who love his appearing. He said, Timothy, the time of my departure has come. The word departure is a military word. The Army used it to refer to breaking camp and moving to another location. The Navy used it to refer to hoisting anchorage, setting sail. In other words, they understood the word departure to mean going from one place to another. That is the way that the Apostle Paul understood death. It is going from one place to another place. He saw the sovereign Lord. When Isaiah saw God, he was sitting on a throne. He is sovereign. He is majestic. He said he was lofty, higher than all others. He is exalted, greater than all others. He is holy, holy, holy. Ladies and gentlemen, it seems to me, and probably to many of you, that in many respects, the world is upside down today. Evil is called good. Good is called evil. Black is called white. White is called black. It is upside down today. And in that circumstance, we sometimes become discouraged, thinking that all is lost. There is no hope. And we desperately need to see a sovereign God again. I pray every night I have for time, Lord, remove the scales from my eyes that I don't just see the garbage that is out there, but help me see the Lord sitting on a throne, because he is sovereign. Isaiah said, I saw. Secondly, he said, I said. Then I said, woe is me, for I am ruined, because I'm a man of unclean lips, and live among a people of unclean lips, and because my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. Isaiah saw God, and then he saw himself, and he said, woe is me. Isaiah was not prideful because of his vision. He was humble because he saw his sinfulness. Senator Graham walked the halls of this world's power, but he never forgot who he was. He was a boy from South Carolina who grew up in a pool hall, and that gave him a humility that was attractive to all of us. Isaiah said, woe is me, and then he saw his sinfulness. He said, I'm a man of unclean lips. Matthew Henry wrote, those are fittest to be employed for God, who are low in their own eyes and are made deeply sensible of their own weakness and unworthiness. Senator Graham knew and confessed his sinfulness. He knew his need. And then the holy God, Isaiah said, cleanses us. Verse 6. Then one of the seraphim flew to me, and in his hand was a glowing coal that he had taken from the altar with tongs. He touched my mouth with it and said, now that this has touched your lips, your wickedness is removed, and your sin is atoned for. Senator Graham did not always know the language of the church, but I believe he knew the Lord. He confessed that, and his actions confirmed that. He was a tireless fighter for the unborn. He fought for peace. He fought for justice. He fought for Christian values. But you know what troubles me most? Those people who know the language of the church, and because they know the language, they convince us they know the Lord, when their actions testify that they do not. I believe that he knew the Lord, but not always our language. Third, I heard. Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, who should I send? Who will go for us? I said, here am I, send me. The Lord said, who will go for us? And Isaiah said, here am I, send me. I think Senator Graham heard that voice, who will go for us? And he said, here am I, send me. He traveled the world on a quest for peace. How many times was he in the Middle East? 10 times in Ukraine, just came back from a successful mission. He heard the voice of God. Who will go for us? Here am I, send me. But ladies and gentlemen, after the Lord tells us to go, there is a time when he tells us to come. Senator Graham went, and then he went home to heaven. You know, all of us are going to end up in heaven or hell. I don't know. I'm curious about heaven. I know some about it because of what I read. The Bible says it's a place of beauty, more beautiful than Senator Graham's beloved South Carolina, streets of gold, gates of pearl, place of service. The Bible says his servants shall serve him. I used to hear about heaven, and I thought, I'm going to be bored to death up there. I mean, sitting on a cloud trying to keep my robe straight, my halo on, and all that stuff. And then I read that verse. It says that his servants shall serve him. I believe we're going to be productive when we get to heaven. I'm not sure what we'll do, but I believe we'll be productive. Is it a place of sinlessness? There's none there. Place of peace. The Bible says he shall wipe away every tear from their eyes. There shall no longer be any death. There shall no longer be any mourning, crying, pain. First things have passed away. Place of reunion. We will see again those who know the Lord if we know the Lord. I believe, and I do, I believe I'll see my mother, my dad again, my brother, my sister, our senator. I believe that we will be reunited. Will we know each other? We're not going to have less sense up there than we do down here, so yes, we're going to know each other when we get there. Let me close with this. I read this some time ago, and it's always been meaningful to me because it is a description of death that pictures it for me, and perhaps it will for you. I'm standing upon the seashore. A ship at my side spreads her white sails in the morning breeze and starts for the blue ocean. She is an object of beauty and strength, and I stand and watch her until at length she is only a ribbon or a white cloud just where the sea and the sky come to mingle with each other. Then someone at my side says, "There, she's gone." She's gone where? Gone from my sight, that's all. She is just as large in mast and hull and spar as she was when she left my side, and just as able to bear her load of living freight to the place of destination. Her diminished size is in me, not in her. And just at the moment when someone at my side says, "There, she's gone," there are other voices ready to take up the glad shout, "There she comes," and that is dying. Senator Graham is gone from our shore, but he has been welcomed on heaven's shore. Our gracious Father, we thank you for the promise in Jesus Christ that those who know him will be forever with you, and we will be reunited with those loved ones in Christ. Lord, I pray for Darlene and the family. I pray that you will comfort them, give them peace, and bless them. And I thank you, Father, for the friendship, for the life of Senator Graham. He was a blessing to us. Father, thank you for these who have come to pay their respects. I pray you'll bless them in Jesus' name. Amen.
When
As we prepare to conclude the service, I would ask that you remain at your seats until the minister of music has dismissed you. Following the benediction, the family is going to recess behind the casket, after which the honor guard will prepare to escort Senator Graham's remains from the sanctuary to street level. And once the family has exited the sanctuary down to the cars behind the casket, you'll be dismissed. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for your continued prayers for Darlene, for Senator Graham's family and his staff, and all those who will mourn in the days ahead. Now receive this blessing from the word of the Lord. The Lord will protect you from all evil. He will keep your soul. The Lord will guard your going out and your coming in from this time forth and forever. And the peace of God, which surpasses all comprehension, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Amen.
be seated. They've asked us please to do that, as Pastor West said, and they'll give me a signal when all is clear in just a moment. So if everyone would please remain seated and not leave the building yet, that's what the family have asked us to do.
This is SCETV's Gavin
Double
Jackson.
doors of First Baptist Church now open as members of the military escort the casket of late Senator Graham down the stairs.
We're going to come back in right now here as we watch the final images as the conclusion of Senator Lindsey Graham's Celebration of Life service at First Baptist Church in downtown Columbia. It was roughly a 2-hour-long service that started at noon and has just concluded. And we're going to be with you just for a few more moments here. I'm with USC political science professor Kirk Randazzo on the State House grounds where today
Senator Graham's sister, Darlene, members of the family onlooking as the casket is now loaded into the hearse by those military pallbearers. Hands over their hearts in respect for a lifetime of legacy of service to the state of South Carolina and our nation. The American flag draped casket now slid into the hearse as the pallbearers begin to back away. And you can see a fleet of law enforcement from the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division who will also make that 100-mile journey to Pickens County, where Senator Graham will be buried later this afternoon. You can see that dignitary insignia on the hearse there, as well as the American flags. Now beginning to close the door of that hearse as Senator Graham leaves Columbia one last time. The family of Senator Graham now loading into the vehicles that will follow the hearse to Pickens County for that private family burial service. We are told that close friends will also attend this, but it is not open to the public. Motorcycles from the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division beginning their engines as they begin the journey to Pickens County. Senator Graham preparing to leave Columbia one last time from First Baptist Church here on Hampton Street. And this comes after he made his journey here from the Capitol, where my colleague Bill Burr is now.
Emily, thank you. As you said, Governor McMaster and several others had poignant comments about Senator Lindsey Graham. Stories, scriptures, and sentiments. That was the theme from the pastors and the politicians who knew Lindsey Graham best. They offered several stories, personal anecdotes, behind-the-scenes stories that a lot of people didn't hear of. They talked about Lindsey Graham as a politician, as an elected leader, and the things that he did, but they really focused on Lindsey Graham as a person. They talked about his giving nature. They talked about his sense of humor. They just talked about how he related to the common man. They talked about how he would talk to the people that took care of the golf carts at the golf courses when he would go out and play a round of golf, and he was just as nice to the staff as he was to the owners of the golf course. They emphasized him as just a true public servant that ran through his veins. He wanted to serve the people, and he wanted to let people know that he was with them. They talked about his humble beginnings from Seneca, South Carolina, from Central South Carolina, and to his final resting place where he will be in the next hour and a half. Let's listen to a couple of the comments from the people that spoke: Governor Henry McMaster, Senator Tim Scott, and former Congressman Trey Gowdy.
If the singer-songwriter Vince Gill were here, y'all maybe know the song. I bet I know what he would say. He'd say, "Go rest high on that mountain, son. Your work on earth is done. Go to heaven a-shouting, love for the Father and the Son." We love you, Lindsey. Goodbye. Until we meet again.
Lindsey was an original. I would challenge each of us to honor Lindsey Graham by living as originals. God's imprint on each of us, unique and specific. It reminds me of Romans 12:2, to know the acceptable and perfect will of God. Second lesson.
Chosen by his people, this lawyer from a small upstate law firm would be responsible for picking Supreme Court justices. Lindsey Graham is a metaphor for us, for the country, for our state.
Touching words from former Congressman Trey Gowdy, Senator Tim Scott, and Governor Henry McMaster. Ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for joining us for our special coverage of the funeral service and a memorial for former Senator Lindsey Graham. We're going to have much more on our newscast coming up later today on ABC News 4 at 5 and 6 o'clock. For now, reporting live from Columbia for our entire team, I'm Bill Burr, ABC News 4, Columbia.